there is a version of you that you don't like to talk about. The angry version, the jealous version, the version who wants to be admired, who wants attention, who has imagined walking away from someone without explaining herself. The version who sometimes feels selfish, resentful, needy. The version who has looked at another person's life and thought, why them? Why not me? You probably don't introduce this person to anyone. Maybe you don't even introduce them to yourself. Instead, you've spent years becoming someone more acceptable, more kind, calmer, easier to understand. You learned how to smile when you were irritated, how to say it's okay when it wasn't, how to swallow a response because you didn't want to be difficult. And eventually, you became so good at being the person you were supposed to be that you forgot you were performing. But there's something strange about the parts of ourselves we bury. They don't always stay buried. Sometimes they begin making decisions. There's a woman named Lena. If you asked the people in her life to describe her, they would probably use the same words. Sweet, dependable, patient, the kind of person who answers the phone. And Lena always answered the phone. Even at 10:47 on a Wednesday night when she was already in bed, her lamp turned low, her body heavy from a day she'd barely had time to process. Her phone would light up on the nightstand, a friend's name. And for half a second, before she answered, Lena would feel something. A tightening in her chest, a quiet irritation. Sometimes she would stare at the phone and think, I don't want to do this tonight. Then almost immediately, another voice would arrive. Don't be selfish. So Lena answered. Hey, she'd say, softening her voice. What's wrong? An hour later, she'd still be listening. Her room would be dark now. The glass of water beside her bed untouched. Her eyes burning from exhaustion. And somewhere underneath the sympathetic sounds she made into the phone, resentment was growing. Lena didn't call it resentment. She wasn't a resentful person. She was the nice one. So she pushed the feeling down. The next morning, she woke up tired and strangely irritated with her friend. Then she felt guilty for being irritated. So she became even nicer. This is how the shadow often enters our lives. Not dramatically, not as some evil version of ourselves standing in a dark hallway. It enters quietly, through the feelings we refuse to name. Carl Jung used the word shadow to describe the parts of the personality that exist outside the identity we consciously claim as our own. But the shadow isn't simply everything bad about you. It's everything you've decided cannot be you. And most of those decisions began long before you understood you were making them. A child gets angry. An adult becomes uncomfortable. Watch your attitude. The child learns something. Anger creates distance. A little girl speaks loudly, confidently, without shrinking. Don't be bossy. She learns something. Power makes people dislike me. A boy begins to cry. Come on. Toughen up. He learns something. Pain must be hidden. A child asks for attention at the wrong moment. Stop being dramatic. Need becomes embarrassment. And slowly, almost invisibly, a person begins dividing themselves. This part can stay. This part has to go. Kindness can stay. Anger goes downstairs. Independence can stay. Need goes downstairs. Humility stays. Ambition goes downstairs. Calmness stays. Intensity downstairs. Imagine your personality as a house. Beautiful from the outside. Clean rooms. Open windows. Everything carefully arranged for visitors. But somewhere in that house is a basement. And throughout your life, every time you discovered a part of yourself that seemed unacceptable, you carried it down the stairs. You put it in a box, closed the lid, and went back upstairs. Maybe you haven't visited that basement in years. but the house still sits on top of it. Lena's house was beautiful, metaphorically speaking. She was the friend people trusted. At work, she was easy to manage. In relationships, she prided herself on being understanding. She didn't nag. She didn't ask for too much. She gave people space. When someone disappointed her, Lena was very good at finding an explanation for their behavior. They're probably stressed. They're going through a lot. Maybe I misunderstood. She could build an entire defense case for someone who had hurt her before she ever allowed herself to admit, "That hurt me." One afternoon, Lena sat at her kitchen counter rewriting a text message. She had typed, "I didn't like how you spoke to me last night." She stared at it, deleted it, then typed, "Hey, I just wanted to check in about last night. I know you probably didn't mean anything by it, lol." She stared again, added a heart, deleted the heart, added a laughing emoji. Then she put the phone face down on the counter and rubbed her forehead. Why was this so difficult? She wasn't trying to start an argument. She wasn't being cruel. She was simply trying to say, "I didn't like that." But somewhere inside Lena, honesty and danger had become tangled together. To be honest was to risk being difficult. To be difficult was to risk being rejected. So she softened and softened and softened until there was barely a person left inside the sentence. Maybe you know what that feels like. Maybe you've rewritten the text. Maybe you've laughed after saying something serious so the other person wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Maybe you've said, "I don't care," about something you care deeply about. Maybe you've called yourself easygoing when, in reality, you simply learned to have your feelings in private. Who are you when no one needs you to be pleasant? That's not an easy question, because most of us have an identity we're deeply invested in protecting. I'm the strong one. I'm the nice one. I'm the rational one. I'm the independent one. I'm the person who doesn't get jealous. I'm the person who doesn't need attention. I'm the person who never gets angry. And the stronger the identity, the more carefully we sometimes have to hide the evidence that contradicts it. Lena had a coworker named Simone, and Lena could not stand her. Simone was loud, confident. She interrupted sometimes. She wore clothes that drew attention to her. When she had an idea in a meeting, she said it without wrapping it in 5 layers of apology. "I think we should do it this way." That was it. "No, sorry, this might be stupid." "No, I don't know, just an idea." No nervous laugh. Lena watched her one morning from across the conference room. Simone had just disagreed with their manager. Calmly, directly, and 5 minutes later, she was drinking her coffee like nothing had happened. Lena felt heat rise in her chest. She's so full of herself. That thought came quickly, too quickly. Later that evening, Lena complained about Simone to a friend. "She's just a lot." But that night, something about the interaction stayed with her. Why did Simone bother her so much? There were other people at work she didn't like. People who were genuinely rude. People who were careless. But Simone produced something different in her. An intensity. And sometimes, intensity is worth examining. This doesn't mean every person who irritates you is secretly your shadow. Sometimes people are inconsiderate. Sometimes someone crosses a boundary. Sometimes you dislike a person because they're behaving badly. You don't need to turn every unpleasant interaction into a psychological scavenger hunt. But there are moments when our reaction is larger than the moment in front of us. And in those moments, there may be a question worth asking. What is it about them that bothers you so much? What do they allow themselves to do that you never allow yourself to do? Could your anger be pointing toward a freedom you secretly envy? Lena didn't want to be Simone. At least, that's what she told herself. But she wanted something Simone had. Permission. permission to take up space without immediately checking the room to see if anyone was uncomfortable, permission to disagree, permission to be misunderstood, permission to let someone else manage their own reaction. Lena had spent years calling these things selfishness. And because she refused to be selfish, she had also refused to be assertive. This is one of the most misunderstood things about the shadow. We imagine our hidden self as a monster, cruel, dangerous, something that must be controlled. But sometimes the thing you buried wasn't evil. Sometimes you buried your confidence because confident children were called arrogant. Sometimes you buried your creativity because someone laughed. Sometimes you buried your sexuality because desire was treated like shame. Sometimes you buried your ambition because wanting more made the people around you uncomfortable. Sometimes you buried your voice because keeping the peace was more important than telling the truth. The shadow doesn't only contain your darkness. It may contain some of your life. And this is where things become uncomfortable. Because the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge don't simply vanish. Think of a beach ball held underwater. At first, it's easy. You press down. The ball disappears beneath the surface. But you have to keep pressing. You adjust your grip. You use more strength. The water pushes back. And the entire time you're trying to enjoy the pool, part of your attention is occupied. Keep it down. Don't let it come up. Keep it down. Eventually, your hand slips, and the ball explodes through the surface. This is the person who says, "I never get angry," and then erupts over a plate left in the sink. The person who gives endlessly and then suddenly cuts everyone off. The person who insists they don't need reassurance but quietly tests their partner's love. The person who criticizes attention-seeking while secretly feeling invisible. The person who judges someone else's ambition while resenting their own stagnant life. The person who says yes for 6 months, then becomes furious that no one knew they wanted to say no. We often call these moments out of character. But what if they're not? What if they're pieces of the character you refuse to meet? Lena began noticing her resentment, not fixing it, not judging it, just noticing. She noticed the small flash of irritation when her mother volunteered her for something without asking. She noticed how often she agreed to plans and secretly hoped they would be canceled. She noticed that when people called her so strong, part of her felt proud and another part wanted to scream. One night, she sat alone in her car, outside her apartment. The engine was off. Rain moved slowly across the windshield, catching the orange light from the parking lot. She had been sitting there for 11 minutes. Not because anything terrible had happened. She was just tired. The kind of tired sleep doesn't always fix. Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat. She looked at the screen. Another request. And for once, Lena didn't immediately answer. She sat there, hands resting in her lap, and a thought appeared. I don't want to help anyone tonight. Lena felt ashamed almost immediately. Then another thought. I'm angry. She swallowed. I'm tired of being the understanding one. The rain continued against the windshield, and for the first time, Lena allowed the sentence to exist without correcting it. She didn't say, but I love my friends. She didn't say, other people have it worse. She didn't say, I should be grateful. She simply sat there and admitted, I'm angry. And beneath the anger, there were needs. Lena wanted someone to notice when she was tired. She wanted to be chosen without earning it through usefulness. She wanted attention sometimes. She wanted to say no and not spend the next 3 hours analyzing whether someone was upset. She wanted to disappoint people and survive their disappointment. She wanted to be cared for. And perhaps the hardest thing to admit was that she had judged other people for openly wanting the very things she secretly wanted. She called them needy. She called them dramatic. She called them selfish. Because if their needs were acceptable, then she would have to ask herself why she'd spent so many years abandoning her own. There are realizations that feel like freedom. And then there are realizations that simply make the room quieter. This was the second kind. Lena didn't drive home transformed. She didn't wake up the next morning with perfect boundaries. She didn't suddenly become fearless. She just knew something she hadn't known before. The nice version of her wasn't the whole version of her. And maybe it never had been. Jung believed that becoming whole required a willingness to encounter the parts of ourselves that our conscious identity would rather reject. Not worship them, not obey them, encounter them. Because integration does not mean that every feeling becomes an instruction. If you feel jealous, integration doesn't mean destroying someone else's happiness. If you feel angry, it doesn't mean cruelty is justified. If part of you wants attention, it doesn't mean every room must revolve around you. Awareness is not permission to behave without responsibility. It's the opposite. Awareness gives you a choice. You cannot consciously choose what you refuse to consciously see. Imagine someone else has been driving your car. You sit in the passenger seat with your eyes closed. The car turns left. You ask, "Why do I always end up here?" It speeds up. You say, "Why does this keep happening to me?" It takes the same road, chooses the same relationships, avoids the same conversations, creates the same resentment, and you keep trying to change the destination without ever opening your eyes and looking at who's touching the wheel. The shadow gains influence through invisibility. What we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves often gains more influence over our lives. Not less. But when you see it, something changes. Not everything, but something. You notice the jealousy and ask what it wants to tell you. Maybe you're not a terrible person. Maybe someone's courage is reminding you of the life you keep postponing. You notice the resentment. Maybe resentment is showing you where you've been saying yes without consent. You notice the person you criticize obsessively. What do they possess? Confidence? Freedom? Attention? Discipline? Beauty? Boldness? What if the question isn't simply, why are they so annoying? What if the question is, what have I forbidden myself from becoming? You might start paying attention to the identities you protect most fiercely. I'm always the nice one. What would happen if you weren't? I'm the strong one. Who are you afraid you'll become if you need help? I'm independent. Is that freedom? Or is it armor? I'm easygoing. Or have you simply become skilled at disconnecting from your preferences? You don't need to answer these questions quickly. Some questions lose their power when we rush toward an answer. Carry them. Watch yourself. Notice what makes your body tense. Notice the conversations you replay in the shower. Notice the people you judge before they've even finished speaking. Notice the moments you say, "That's just not who I am." Maybe it isn't, but maybe it's a room in your house you haven't entered yet. Lena started experimenting, quietly. The next time someone asked her to do something she didn't have the energy for, she felt the familiar panic rise. Say yes. Be easy. Don't disappoint them. She typed, "I can't tonight," then stared at the message. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Normally, she would have added 3 paragraphs, an explanation, an apology, evidence that she was still a good person. Instead, she sent 4 words. "I can't tonight. Sorry." Her heart raced. Nothing happened. The earth continued rotating. The other person replied, "No worries." Lena actually laughed. Not because every boundary would always be received that easily. They wouldn't. Some people become uncomfortable when you stop playing the role that made their life convenient. But in that moment, Lena gathered a tiny piece of evidence. She could say no and remain herself. Another day, she spoke in a meeting before she had rehearsed the sentence perfectly. Her voice shook slightly. She said the idea anyway. She began asking for help before she reached complete exhaustion. She allowed herself to admit when she wanted reassurance. She still felt jealous sometimes, still got angry, still caught herself judging Simone. But instead of immediately pushing those feelings underwater, Lena became curious. What are you trying to show me? That question changed the relationship. Because the goal was never to destroy the shadow. You can't amputate half of your humanity and call the result wholeness. The goal is to bring enough light into the basement that you can finally see what's been stored there. Some boxes contain things you need to handle carefully. Old rage, cruel impulses, pain you've redirected toward innocent people, patterns you are responsible for changing. But other boxes contain things you may have been searching for your entire life. Your voice, your ambition, your boundaries, your desire, your ability to take up space, your willingness to say, "No, I want this. That hurt me. Look at me. Help me. I disagree. I'm angry. I need more." Simple sentences, terrifying sentences, when you've spent your life building an identity around never saying them. Maybe the hidden version of you isn't trying to ruin your life. Maybe they've been knocking from behind a door you locked years ago. And every time the knocking became louder, you turned up the television, stayed busy, started another routine, entered another relationship, scrolled, worked, smiled, explained. Anything to avoid walking down the hallway and putting your hand on the door. But the knocking continued. What if you opened it? Not all at once, not recklessly, just enough to look inside. What are you angry about? What do you want? Who do you envy? Where are you pretending not to care? What part of yourself are you constantly trying to prove doesn't exist? And perhaps the most difficult question, who did you have to become in order to be loved? Then ask yourself something else. Who did you have to hide? Becoming whole isn't about becoming perfectly good. It isn't about eliminating jealousy, never feeling anger, wanting nothing, needing no one. It isn't about polishing yourself until every uncomfortable human emotion disappears. That's another mask. Wholeness is consciousness. It's knowing there is anger in you and choosing what to do with it. Knowing you can be selfish and learning the difference between selfishness and self-respect. Knowing you want attention and becoming honest about your need to be seen. Knowing you have the capacity to hurt people. And taking responsibility for how you use your words. Knowing you are not one simple, clean, socially acceptable thing. You are a house with many rooms, some filled with sunlight, some you haven't entered in years. And becoming yourself may require walking through all of them. Lena is still the kind one, but now, kindness is something she chooses. Not a cage she lives inside. She still answers the phone. Sometimes, she still helps people. When she has the capacity, she still cares deeply about how others feel. But she's beginning to understand that their feelings are not always instructions for her behavior. And Simone? Lena still finds her annoying sometimes. Because sometimes, Simone is annoying, but Lena smiles when she catches herself watching Simone speak confidently in a meeting. There's less heat now, more curiosity, maybe even a little admiration. Because sometimes the people who disturb us are not showing us who we hate. Sometimes they are standing too close to someone we abandoned. There is a version of you that you don't like to talk about. Maybe they're angry. Maybe they're ambitious. Maybe they're needy, loud, sensual, competitive, sensitive, powerful. Maybe they want more than you've allowed yourself to admit. You've spent years running from their shadow. But shadows do something interesting. The farther you run toward the setting sun, the longer they become. Maybe it's time to stop running. Turn around. Look, you may not love everything you find. You may have apologies to make, patterns to change, truths to accept. But somewhere inside the person you've spent years trying not to be, there may be pieces of the person you're trying so desperately to become. The door is still there. The room is still waiting. And the hidden version of you is still knocking. Maybe tonight you answer. This is the Becoming Project. And becoming whole begins when you are finally willing to meet all of yourself.